Alright, so this is going to be kind of a comparison video between the original A7 and then the A7 Mark II. It's also going to be a short demonstration on the autofocus improvements that were added to the A7 Mark II with the version 2.0 firmware update released by Sony in the middle of November of 2015. And then I kind of go into detail about what my little research has gleaned from that, as well as a practical test of two different Canon L lenses. But for right now, I'm going to show you some differences between the two bodies as a whole, and then we'll go on to the autofocus test. And I also want to apologize in advance for any airplanes you may hear. I live near an airport, so it's kind of hard to avoid. So, first off, obviously, the biggest difference between the two is the grip. The grip on the Mark II is a whole lot beefier, mostly due to the fact that it now has in-body stabilization, but to be honest, it's a good upgrade altogether. I didn't mind the original one. I actually was perfectly fine with it, and then when I got the second one, I was like, oh hey, this is much better. So it's a personal taste thing. Having held the Mark II for about a week or so now, every time I go back to the original seems fine. So I wouldn't really worry about it too much. I will say that I do agree with other people when they say the shutter button is in an odd location, but again, when you come from one that's right, and then when you go to that, I don't notice it a whole lot, but that's just me. I will start off by saying you probably are wondering why the screen protector is upside down on the Mark II, and I'll get into that one first. They changed the actual physical location of the screen from the first one to the second one, and this is the screen protector from the Mark I. So let's get that out of the way. I know it's upside down. I got it. Thanks. The biggest gripe, I guess, that I had with the Mark I was the buttons up here. They were kind of hard to get because, here, let me tilt this. I don't know if you can see it very well, but the screen, or the entire body right here, has this lip. It kind of got in the way when you went to push a button, and there's nothing you could do about it. You have to use the fat part of your thumb to push it. It just didn't work. I love the dials on the front and the back, but those were just hard to get to. On the Mark II, they got rid of the lip, and it's now at an angle, as you can tell right here. So these are much easier to push without having to use a certain part of your thumb. You can just slide it over, push the button, and it works. I'm really happy about that. Change that they made that I'm not happy about is the dials that I just mentioned. First of all, they are skinnier right here than the first ones, which obviously right there will make it difficult. But, and let me focus this for you so you can see what I'm talking about. They added some kind of a cover or something to the top of it, so when your thumb goes across it, it doesn't have a whole lot of surface area to interact with. And the front dial isn't too much better, but it's not bad. They're fine. I mean, they do work, you can reach them, but it's not as easy to reach as it once was. Alright, next I wanted to move on to the SD card slot. The actual door is significantly smaller on the new one, which is ironic because it has a better grip. I'm not exactly sure what the thinking was behind either A, making it bigger on the original, or B, making it smaller on the new one, but regardless, it's physically smaller than the original. Secondly, I don't have an actual memory card in the original, but because of the smaller grip and the less space on the battery door, which I'll show you in a minute, it has to go in this way, whereas on the Mark II, it goes in like any other camera and goes into the side this way. Again, not a big deal. The actual orientation of the card itself is the same when you pull it out. the contacts are on this side, whereas the contacts are on the front side of this one. So when you pull it out of either direction, it's going to be facing the same direction. Another thing that was changed was the actual doors themselves. The original had a little lock that you can flip back and forth to lock and unlock the door. On the other one, it's actually like my 5D Mark III that I used to have, which ironically I sold when I got this, as well as a 7D, which I also just sold. I literally just switched over to mirrorless Sony system. But this reminds me of the Canon doors because it's a switch that you flick down. It's a simple switch that you flick down instead of something that, to be honest, it's kind of hard to find with your thumb because when you're kind of rushing around, it can be a little difficult. Whereas with this, your thumb just kind of triggers it and opens it up. The battery itself is actually oriented in the same direction, which is not the case with the A6000. The A6000, which I'm using to film this, the battery is opposite, which is kind of odd, the fact that it uses the same battery but not the same direction. But I kind of like the new update to the battery door. I think the switch that they put on there is a whole lot easier to find than this one. Even though this one is bigger, this one is easier to find. Alright, and now we move on to the biggest gripe that I have with the new generation, the Mark II, over the Mark I. The build quality, this is not the complaint, but the build quality of the Mark II is superior. The Mark I is plastic pretty much everywhere. The doors are really plastic, the front's pretty plastic. On the Mark II, it's metal. It's a metal construction. Front, back, top, sides, even the doors feel more sturdy. I'm pretty sure they're metal, but I don't know for certain. The complaint that I have is they redesigned, there's my dog, they redesigned the door, the directions the door opens, as well as on the interface ports, they changed the directions. And I'll show you why that's a problem in just a sec. The original, they open like that. That is pretty neat. That works for me. It's kind of hard to see in there, but I've got the ports easily accessible. The only thing that I noticed that was a problem is when you had a camera strap on here, which I've removed all of the fasteners. I don't ever really use them. If I do, I can put them on there. But when you used a camera strap, it got in the way. Otherwise, it wasn't that big of a deal. In fact, I really liked it. The only downside is when it's open, because they're all plastic, hinged, plastic construction, I can see them breaking easily. Say for instance, you have a mic plugged in to the microphone port and somebody trips on the cord and tugs it this way. If you had it that way, I can see the door probably snapping off. I never had that problem because I take very good care of my equipment, but I can see it happening. On the new one, they went for a design that I find kind of foolish. It now has the generalized rubber attachments on the bottom that kind of bounce them up. Canon had this on the 5D Mark III, and I thought they were stupid. They just did not work very well. In fact, they even separated the headphone port and the microphone port, which again is stupid. At least Sony has common sense to put them on the same area, so you only have to uncover one flap. With the 5D Mark III, you had to uncover two flaps and have two of them in the way. Now granted, I will admit that Canon was at least smart enough and allowed them to rotate, so I could pull them, they actually went up, so you pull them up and then you could rotate them so they would stay out of the way. Sony didn't even do that. The biggest complaint that I have is with the interface port. I specifically bought a right angle plug to fit into here to charge the camera if it was in my bag. I have a backpack style camera bag as well as a shoulder sling style, well, not sling, but messenger style bag. So I would have the camera sitting in there, I would have the plug in there, and I would turn the battery pack that I have on and it would charge it while I was out and about. Well, I bought it so that the cord would go up. Here, it doesn't. They flipped it around, so now the cord goes down. And when you have a cord that's going down into this, it creates a pretty bad, I mean, it technically can work, but I now have to use a different cord that just goes straight out when I bought one specifically to go up. It stayed out of the way. It had less of a chance that it would be broken off accidentally by moving something in and out because it didn't stick out as far. I don't understand why they flipped them around. What was so important that they needed to flip them around? It could be the contacts on the inside on the motherboard. They needed to flip them around for whatever reason. But it's frustrating. If you're gonna put this thing that you can't swivel out of the way, you can't move, I mean, you can do that, but that doesn't look very good. Why flip them around? If you've already made something that goes in one direction, then keep it that direction. The A6000 is the same as the original A7. When I use that cord on it, it goes vertically. It's just the Mark II that they flipped it around and have it going the opposite direction. Next, I wanted to talk about button placements, button layouts, the back face of the camera, I guess you could say, back plate of the camera. What you interact with the most, pretty much, the buttons. I'm going to start off with the one that everybody has a gripe on, and that's the video button. I've not had a problem with it. I think, to be honest, it's been blown way out of proportion. I do understand the initial concern on it, but people keep complaining about it, and I don't understand it. Yeah, it's in a stupid spot, but I've not had a problem sliding my thumb over and pushing, and it finds the button. That's just me. Now that that's out of the way, let's move on. The second generation of the A7 series of cameras has 4 custom buttons now, which is great. The more the merrier. The new one is now placed on top. So there's the first one and the second one. Third and fourth is the trash can. Those are the same. The second one I added to my workflow to be the button that is used to adjust the steady shot stabilization. So say for instance I throw a 50mm on there, select 50 and you go. Or I have the 135mm f2L, toss that on there, set it to 135 and you're good. The steady shot goes all the way up to 1000mm. I'm pretty sure that would equate to if you had a 500mm zoom lens with a 2x optical extension tube. I don't know because I don't own either of those, but I would assume that that would be an equivalent that it would work towards. Like I said, the original A7 only has 3 custom buttons. Yeah, it's great to have 4, but I was okay with 3. I've obviously added something to my workflow that takes advantage of the 4th one. Another addition, or I guess change, to the buttons is over here on the right. On the original, it's the white balance button. On the new one, it's what you can use to change the ISO. That over here is just spinning the wheel, which I found a little cumbersome. Every once in a while your thumb would accidentally hit it or something would happen and it would change the ISO on you, and that was a problem for me. I now don't have the wheel doing anything. I just have it for the button. That is an advantage. White balance, I don't change a whole lot. I've found that the A7, or to Sony in general really, because my A6000 does this too, it does a pretty good job of getting the white balance correct for me. I have not had a problem with it. For pictures, I shoot RAW. For video, for video, I trust it. It does a very good job with the auto white balance, so I've not needed to change it, which is why I've left it off. On the A7 series, you can have it, not that one. You can change the control wheel to be your white balance if you so desired. So you could still have your white balance choices within easy reach, or you could set this button to be white balance and have the dial do your ISO like it was on the original. Customization, make it work for you. For me, I have the wheel do nothing and the ISO on the button. All right, now we're gonna move on to the front plates and a couple other things. First off, if you have them side by side, the most noticeable thing is the build quality, like I mentioned. It is uniform all the way around. On the original, you can, in person, tell it's shiny and quite plastic. Over here, you can tell it's a grippier metal construction. It's a lot more solid. Big bonus. I think the best change is the actual switch that you have to turn them on and off. It is easier to turn them on and off than it was on the first series. I always had a problem with my finger slipping off of the switch to turn the cameras on, probably due to where it was actually placed and how your finger would reach to get there, but that's just a problem that I had with it. The other couple minor things that are changed, like I mentioned already, the dial. This time the infrared receiver is up here rather than down here where it is on the original. The AF assist light is actually in the same place. However, the grip on the original is wider this way because of its smaller overall form factor. Since this one is bigger overall, they don't need it to go as far. No big deal. All right. Last, before I move on to the autofocus tests, I want to show you the screens, the articulation of the screens, their actual sizes. The newer cameras, the screens themselves are physically smaller, they're thinner. The articulation point is also a little more higher up on the screen itself than the original. Most notably though, this is how far this one articulates. This one can articulate a little bit more. So when pulled, it can actually be pulled out and keep the vertical aspect of the shooting angle that you would be using that for. The downward angle, I can't show you because of the quick release plate on here, but the downward angle I think is a little more in favor of the original A7 series. I think it's kind of lost its downward angle, but most people aren't going to use that anyway, so I don't think it's that big of a loss. Actually, maybe I can, there you go, I can show you that way. I think it is in favor of the original a little bit. There you go. But still, overall, I enjoy the A7 Mark II more. On a note, since I'm in this angle, the microphone holes up here on the top are physically bigger on the second generation than the first. I haven't done any tests to see if the microphone quality is actually any better, but considering I was already happy with the preamps inside of the camera for external microphones, I'm pretty sure it would be the same. I don't know if it would let in more sound or not. I'll leave that up to you guys to figure out. One of the features that Sony has now added to the A7 Mark II with the firmware version 2.0 update is the ability to use either A-mount lenses with the Sony adapter, or in my case, Canon lenses with a third-party adapter, Metabones, Commlite, Viltrox, Photodiox. I have the Commlite. It was about 80 bucks or something like that when I bought it, versus 400 for the Metabones. Yeah, I can't update the firmware for the Commlite, but it's $300 cheaper, which is more beneficial to me. The Face Detect autofocus, as far as I can tell, will only work on lenses that are made from 2003. I'm from my research is determining later. So I've heard the 17-40 works, the 24-70 Mark I works, but older ones don't. The 85 1.8, in my case, the 135mm f2L does not work because it was designed in '96. I also have the 24 1.4L version 2, which was later, I think, maybe 2008 when that was released. So it does work with the phase detect autofocus. However, something that doesn't work is the eye autofocus, which I'm about to show you. It does work in contrast detect autofocus, which I think is kind of strange that it will work in that and not phase detect. But let me show you. So right now I'm already set up in contrast detect autofocus. I have a non-moving picture of myself as my subject, and as you can see right here, it's got the box recognizing a face. So when I just do the normal shutter, it finds it no problem. Now I have eye autofocus set up for my auto exposure lock with the switch down. When I push the button, it engages that. There it is, and then you can take the picture. Well, here is phase detect, which are, I don't know if you can see, but there's going to be a little markers around the edges indicating where the edge of the phase detect focus points are. Anything outside of that is going to end up being contrast detect if it doesn't get a phase detect lock. So it's still got my face. As you can see, it still gets my face. But when I do the eye autofocus, it won't work, which I think is kind of a bummer because I would rather the eye autofocus than just the face. However, at least I have the face. I much prefer like the face autofocusing, the face recognition, than the standard DSLR version. Here are your focus points and you have to make sure you align it properly and everything like that. This is still much better for me, and I'm very happy that I have it. However, it's kind of a bummer that it doesn't work with the superior focusing mode. There you go. All right, so now that I just showed you my 24mm, I'm going to show you my 135mm f2L. Like I said, it was designed in '96, so it doesn't work with the phase detect. I'm going to try it in contrast detection first, just to show you what it can do. It'll still pick up the face with facial recognition. It does work with eye autofocus. I'll show you the regular one first. That's your normal contrast detection right there. So now here's eye autofocus. See, it gets it. It works. It's not as fast as any other phase detect autofocus at this point, at this stage in mirrorless technology, but it does work. And I've only had it miss a few times, which, to be honest, I'd rather it work and miss a couple times than not work at all. And the contrast speed isn't any different than the original A7, which I also have, but now that I have the Mark II, I'm going to be selling my original. Here is what it does with phase detect. I'm going to go ahead and loosen it and get my face completely inside of the phase detection zones. See, now you can see the little squares I was talking about. So it's right smack in the middle. And this is what it does. It never locks on. So I'm going to start with back focus now. So, okay, here's my face. It just shuffles around. And like it said with the other one, eye autofocus wouldn't even work. I don't know why Sony has opted to neglect both the eye autofocus, and I don't think it's Sony's fault in particular that older lenses don't work. I think it's just the way that Canon's changed their design, but it's still kind of a bummer. And contrast works just fine. All right, so next I'm going to show you what the phase detect autofocus looks like with my 24mm, the one that it does work with. I'm going to only use the center frame, the center focusing mode as my subject because there's not a whole lot of room to move around, but it does work for a wide, selective point, whatever. So I'm going to be, my two targets are going to be my original A7 here and then the pictures in the background. So a good close focus, distant focus test. And as you can see, it does get it. For whatever reason, the facial detection thinks that those picture frames make a face. So that's why you'll see that every once in a while. But it works. And it works quite well. Lastly, before I get into my closing statements, I wanted to also talk about the video formats and the quality settings. It will do XAVCS now, in addition to the AVCHD and the MP4 that the original model did. XAVC requires a 64 gigabyte or higher SDXZ memory card. If you get one of those, it'd be best to get one that's UHS-1, that's ultra high speed, 1 or higher. And then there's another additional rating of U1 and U3. U1 would be the minimum. That is, I think they say 30 megabytes minimum write speed. This does 50 megabits per second, which I'll show what the math is for that in the video. I'm not going to talk about it. But you need a 64 gigabyte SDXC memory card. I don't have one for this yet. I have one on the A6000, but not for the A2. I will get one after Christmas rolls around. But for now, I just have a 32 megabyte SanDisk Extreme in there. You can change the frame rate. So they have a better frame rate system than the AVCHD, and I'll show you that also in a second. 60p at 50 megabits, 30p at 50 megabits, or 24p at 50 megabits. That is 1, 2, and 3. Either A, B, or C. It's very, very simple. I usually do 30 or 60. I personally don't like the 24 frames per second, especially when you're doing a video timeline with multiple camera angles that you kind of want to use a multicam sequence with. It messes it up. But I like the smooth nature of the 30 frames per second rather than the ever so slightly jittery 24 frames. Other people like it. I personally don't. The AVCHD format options are all the same. 60i at 24 megabits, 60i at 17 megabits, 60p, that's the only 60p option, at 28 megabits, 24p at 24 megabits, and 24p at 17 megabits. There is no 30p option. It's kind of odd that it's either only 24 or only 60p. Lastly is the MP4. I use this when I want to transfer it to my iPad quickly or my phone, or even if I just want to make a video that isn't really important, like just me talking about something, or hey, this happened and I want to show what that is. It's great for that because it doesn't take up a lot of room, but these are the only two options you have for it. You've got 1440 by 1080 at 12 megabits. That's a little strange. I'm not quite sure why they chose that. And then the only other option is VGA. So those are the three video recording formats. Next, I'm going to show you how to get those three off of the memory card, and then I'll come back with my closing thoughts. Alright, so in order to get the video files off of the memory card, I'm going to show you how to do it on the memory card coming off of my A6000. Like I said, I don't have one for the A7II yet that's 64 gigabytes, so I'm just using the one I have. It's relatively straightforward for the XAVC and the MP4, but for the AVCHD it's a little confusing, so we'll do that one first. You're going to go to Private and then AVCHD and give it a double click. Now I'm using a Mac, so I'm not exactly sure what you would do on a Windows. So this is just for the Mac. Now when you have one clip that is an AVC HD file, it will just open it by itself. If you have multiple ones, then you can come in here and click the ones you want. However, for the purposes of this example, I'm just picking the first one. There are two options to save. You can either do export, and it'll give you choices. You can pick the one you want. I know it does not change the frame rate, but I'm not sure if it changes the data rate, the megabits per second. I don't mess with that one. I just do the regular save because I can do that from the keyboard. So just Command S and it starts the saving process. Now it changes it to this because that's what AVC HD is, the file it's doing. Inside of the codec it's got these random letters. So change it. Be careful you don't change multiple items to the same thing, or you may overwrite them. It's not all that big of a deal, really. So we'll just do a random name, save it. Now the only bad thing is you have to sit there and wait for it to save. Depending on how long your video is, that could take a while. But that is AVC HD. Next, I'm going to show you the XAVC format. So that is also under private. However, this time you're going to go to M4 root and then go to clip, and it's going to have all of them listed in here for you to find. XML files aren't really going to do anything. I opened one earlier and it just went to Safari, and then Safari didn't even read it. So you don't need to mess with copying them. It's just random information that the camera saves to a XML file. You just want the MP4 files, and that is literally as simple as copy and pasting. Depending on how big the file is, it'll depend on how fast it transfers, but I also have a solid state drive in my computer, so it's going to transfer pretty quickly. If it's going to a spinning hard disk, it's going to take a while. Now I'm going to take you back and go to MP root, which is where you're going to find the regular MP4 files. Again, simple as copy and pasting. Since those are smaller, they're going to take a whole lot less time than the other ones will. But that's it as far as copying those 3 video files off of your memory card and onto your computer goes. Alright, so overall, to be honest, I loved the original A7. I really liked the way it functioned. It was fantastic value. I bought mine for, I think, $800 back in July. For a full frame camera, that's absurd. That's fantastic. I love that. The ISO performance was pretty decent. I shot a picture that was at 6400 in pretty dark conditions. It was shot with the Zeiss 55mm f1.8. If you look at the picture in context, it is actually like it looks good. When you zoom in, that's when you notice the ISO problems at 6400. But nobody is going to be judging a picture based on zooming, and if you do, then, or by cropping, I mean. And if you do, then I guess that's you. And if you want to be that picky, that's fine. I'm looking at the whole picture, and it looks good. If it was actually a picture that was for something, then I would use it. But it was just a picture of my 5D Mark III at the time. But as a whole, I love the original. They were fantastic. The second generation is even better. I love the grip. I love the extra button. I love the placement of the dial for turning it on. I don't like the flaps on the side. I don't like how they rotated the port around. I love the customization as a whole on the A7 series. I guess Sony in general, because it's the same with my A6000. I just love the way Sony is implementing their customizations, their functionalities. Another thing I don't like is the implementation of the menu system. To erase your account with Sony, you have to go through and delete everything. That is absurd. Camera settings, settings that you've saved for memory, the memory recalls, all of it. You have to erase all of it. That is absurd. You should have an option to sign out of your Sony account. Why don't you do that? I don't know if I missed anything. I looked for half an hour to figure out how to sign out. I couldn't figure it out. I Google searched. The top hit that I found was you had to reset. I didn't want to do that. I tried again. That was the only answer I could find. So I did it. If there is a way, then let me know, and I will admit that there's a way, but I don't know. I'm pretty sure there's not a way. And it's really frustrating. That is so stupid. People will set these cameras up to make them work. I mean, that's what they're for. You want them to work so you don't have to think about it when you're actually using it. Well, now you have to go and set everything up again. If you change your email, if you change anything with your account, it's just absurd. In my case, I bought the camera used, and it still had the person's email on there. Now, I'm not a jerk, and I'm not going to go do anything about it, or with their stuff. So I went to to sign out of it. Well, that was after I spent 2 hours setting the camera up the way I wanted it, the way that would work. And then I had to go and do it all over again. It took me another half hour, but that's because I already knew what I wanted, more or less. It's frustrating. But on a whole, I love the Sony system. I just sold a 5D Mark III and a 7DD to have an A7 Mark II and an A6000. I love the way the white balance works. I love the dynamic range of the Sony cameras. I love the form factor. I love the weight. I love it all. I like that it can still use my Canon lenses. And then when I do get that 50mm, it will save me net around $400. That's crazy. That's amazing. And you have the phase detect autofocus points as well. So, thanks for watching. I hope this helped. I know when I was looking around, videos like this helped me. If it helped, let me know. If it didn't help, tell me how I can improve in the future. But overall, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.